Hi everybody, welcome to today's Learning with Google webinar. We're going to be looking at remarketing today. But before I do, I just wanted to say welcome to everybody from around the region. I know that we've got people from the Philippines, India, Malaysia, and Singapore. So it's great to have so many people logged in from so many different markets interested in online media in general, but also Google products as well. Just to give you a quick introduction on myself, my name is Ben King. I work out of the Singapore office, and I work across Google's new product solutions, so things like YouTube, mobile, and Google Display Network, which is the product wherein remarketing lies. Before I get started, though, I just wanted to touch on a couple of housekeeping items. With regard to questions, if you can try and keep questions relatively generic, if they are very, very specific to a client or specific to a market, just in the interests of keeping it relevant for everyone who's on the call, on the webinar. I'll come back to you separately, individually. So with that, let's get started. So as I said, we're going to look at remarketing today, and we're going to do that in 5 different areas before we wrap up with a quick summary at the end. First of all, we're going to look at what is remarketing. So what is it from a theoretical, but also from a functional perspective. Secondly, we're going to look at why use remarketing. So why is remarketing such a powerful tool for marketers within the online space? Thirdly, we're going to look at why remarket with Google. So it's one thing to, I guess, talk through why you would want to implement remarketing, but then there is a number of different offerings available in market. But we at Google feel like, for a variety of reasons, that Google is a very, very powerful option for you, and we're going to go through a couple of those reasons for you today. Fourthly, we're going to look at some sample executions. So what you can actually achieve with remarketing and how that aligns with, different marketing objectives. And fifthly, we're going to have a quick look at one case study, as I said before we sum up. So, what is remarketing? If we could sum up remarketing in one sentence, the way we would put it is that it's a targeting technology that allows you to find users across the web who have previously interacted with your website and speak to them with messages that are relevant to you. So if you think about that, what we're saying is that it's a targeting technology that allows you to figure out what users are doing on your site, how they're engaging with your brand, and then allowing you to speak to them with a very, very tailored message based on all of those behaviors that they've shown. But what I wanted to do was actually go right back to the crux of it and talk about exactly how remarketing works from a technology perspective. Now, I'm sorry if I'm repeating common knowledge for a lot of you, but I just wanted to go right back to the very start and just cover off the very, very basics, because it can apply to, I guess, more advanced conversations that we will have towards the back end of the webinar. So if you're looking at this slide, we have a very, very basic, say, customer or advertiser web page. You have a home page, you have a product page, and you have a conversion page. So if a user turns up on the home page, if you imagine this red dot being a cookie, we at Google, if we have a tag placed on the site, can then align that cookie with what we would call a remarketing list. Now, you would have heard the term cookie pool, remarketing list. They're all exactly the same thing. So if a user turns up, as I said, on the home page, we will then drop that cookie into a bucket that we have labeled a home page bucket, advertiser specific, of course. Likewise, if the user then moves on to the product page, then the cookie will fall into a product page remarketing list or a product page cookie pool. And of course, if the user then falls onto the conversion page or actually goes on and converts, we can then also drop a cookie based on the fact that they have reached that page. Now, if you think about that happening hundreds and hundreds and thousands and sometimes millions of times across some particular websites, we can develop very, very big remarketing lists or very big cookie pools that are labeled very specific based on the action that the user has taken across your website. Now, that then poses the question, how do we refine them? And the simple answer is that when these cookies then turn up on Google's display network, we can identify them, and then we can show them your ad based on exactly the action that they've taken. So if you think about what that means, in the case of serving an ad to the red cookie, we are serving an ad to someone who's landed on the landing page. Now that could be a very different message to what we show to the green cookie, being a cookie that's come from the product page. So an example would be you're a credit card advertiser, you have a generic landing page, you have multiple different products that people can then click off onto. They then go to a product page that relates to, say, a gold card, so that the message that you want to send to the green cookie is a gold card creative, whereas the message you want to send to the red cookie, or the red user, beg your pardon, is a more generic message. So as I said, look, that's a really, really basic explanation of how remarketing works. And I just wanted to start there because then we can sort of move forward and, I guess, use that example or use that principle as we go throughout the webinar when we start talking about the other things that we're going to cover today. So moving on to the second section, why use remarketing? There's 4 key points that I want to cover here. 1 is the time spent online. 2, all other media that you're running will actually work harder if you have remarketing in place. Thirdly, we're going to have a look at repeat traffic and closing the cycle. And then fourthly, we're going to look at the new marketing funnel. So first of all, time spent online. Now, it's pretty obvious what the key point of this slide is, that 5% of time spent online, people are searching. Only 5%. Now, there's a couple of points that I really want to put around that. One is that doesn't mean search isn't vitally important. I mean, search is the gateway to and from your website. It's the way that information is aligned on the internet. So it's crucially important. And the second thing that I want to say is that Google's probably the only website in the world that wants users on and off their website as fast as possible, because it means that we're doing a very good job if they are. But it really raises 2 very, very key questions. One is, what are they doing at the other 95% of the time? And 2, how are you as marketers or as advertisers, how are you speaking to those people, or how are you maintaining that conversation with those people when they're not searching or actively searching for, your product or, a relevant category, or when they're not actually on your site? How are you actually communicating with them? And if you think about what we talked about before with the principles of remarketing, and that we can figure out exactly where all the users are that have been to your website, and we can actually start speaking to them, remarketing is a tool that allows you to stay in contact with your relevant users during that 95% of time. So the second thing that I wanted to talk about is that remarketing makes all your other media work a whole lot harder. Now, this media could be anything. It could be television, it could be print, it could be online video with YouTube, it could be Google Display Network, it could be search, it could be any form of media. I'm not talking about just online here, because a lot of your activity is designed to build brand awareness, generate brand recall, brand affinity. All of these different marketing objectives are all geared towards often driving somebody online to research further into your product prior to purchase. So you've got all this media in market driving people through to your site. Remarketing allows you to then make all of that media work a whole lot harder, because the key point is it doesn't matter how a user gets to the landing page or gets to your site. It just matters that they got there. So once they're there, we can cookie them. And as you saw in the animation at the start of the webinar, you can then find them over and over again and keep speaking to them in different ways based on what they're doing on your site. So the third thing that I wanted to cover was the whole conversation around driving repeat traffic and closing the cycle. So we talked about just then, the top end of the marketing funnel. And we're going to go into, the marketing funnel in a whole lot more detail throughout the back end or the middle of the back end of the webinar. But if you think about, all of the things that we talked about driving into the top end of the funnel, the thing to remember is that 97% of people who actually come to your site will fall off without converting or completing the action that you desire on first-time visit. So 97% of people won't actually do what you want them to do the first time they come to the site. So that really raises the question, what are you doing to ensure that you keep speaking to them, keep reminding them, to come back to the site, to actually convert and actually complete the purchase or the conversion cycle, that you're really driving towards with any given campaign. So I guess that brings me to remarketing, and that remarketing is the way that you bring them back. Building brand affinity, generating brand awareness and all that sort of thing, it's only one part of the conversation. What is so important is to continue that conversation, to continue that presence, to continue that exposure to your relevant audience, to ensure that they then come back to your site and convert as you want them to. So we talked about I did talk about the marketing funnel in the past, but now I want to talk about the new marketing funnel. So this leads into a range of other objectives that can be, met through remarketing technology and remarketing technology at Google. So if you're thinking in terms of a traditional marketing funnel, what we were talking about just then was, really driving the whole brand preference piece. So really driving home the message, really sort of leveraging previous contact that a user has had with your brand to then, drive them to finish or complete or to convert online. But what I want to talk about now is, the post-purchase elements of the new marketing funnel. And what I mean by that are things like brand loyalty and brand advocacy. Now, I'm going to go into these in a little bit more detail towards the back end of the presentation when we start talking about sample executions. But what I wanted to do now was just to sort of introduce it within, the why use remarketing piece. Because if you think about, just the basic technology that we've been talking about, as in being able to speak to users or customers based on how they're interacting with your brand, then you can obviously speak to them after they've purchased with different messages that are really going to sort of drive brand loyalty and then actually encourage them to go out and advocate your brands or your brand to their friends and family and their social connections. So if we're going to sum up why you would use remarketing, first of all, there's the time spent online issue. You got 5% of the time them searching, you got 95% them doing other things. So how are you going to speak to them across that 95% of the other time? And that's remarketing. Secondly, all your other media can work harder if you implement remarketing. Thirdly, it's all about repeat traffic and closing the cycle. And then finally, it's the new marketing funnel that can also be worked in from an objective perspective. So on this slide here, we, not for 1 second, are suggesting that you shouldn't be looking at driving the first-time visit and driving brand awareness. And that's the first piece of the puzzle. That is absolutely crucial to any marketing activity that you have in play at any one time. But it's not the start and the end of the story. It really is just the beginning. The second thing that we really recommend you do is to segment your visitors. So figure out exactly, who these users are or who these customers are based on how they're interacting with your brand and your website. The third piece is to create lists within the AdWords interface, within the Google interface, based on these segments. And the fourth piece is to remarket to them. So, why remarketing with Google? So we've sort of established why remarketing is such a powerful tool in general terms, but there's a number of things that Google do and that Google offer that we feel really set Google apart. So first of all, there's the reach conversation. So I've put up a number here. It says 84% reach across most markets. The reality is that Google Display Network reaches between 83 and 90% of the online populations of almost every single market that has internet access. So, or that Google Display Network is live in, beg your pardon. So why is this important when we're looking at remarketing? So if you think about the visual that we had, at the very, very start of the webinar, each bucket of these users is so valuable to you as an advertiser. Your own data is your most powerful. These users are your low-hanging fruit. They are the users that you want to speak to because they've already shown that initial interest in your brand. So it becomes very, very important to make sure that you're reaching as many of these users as possible. So if you think about reach, it becomes important because if these users are then sort of going out and browsing multiple different pieces of content, and as a network you only reach 50% of the population, then you're going to cut out 50% of potential opportunity. So in this case, we can reach the red cookie with our generic landing page message that we talked about earlier, but we can't reach the green cookie or the green user because that green user doesn't pop up on the smaller network. So if you go back to what I was saying about Google Display Network reaches 83 to 90% of users online, which gives you essentially an 83 to 90% chance of reaching every single cookie within your cookie pool or within your remarketing list. And that's obviously an extremely compelling, unique selling point for Google. The next point, and this really ties into reach, it's not really a separate point in itself, but it really goes into the whole depth argument. So if you can reach the majority of your users, and if you can do it across 83 to 90% of the online space, then you really create a situation whereby you appear to be marketing to your users in a really thorough and really personalized way. So if you look at this quote, I'm just going to read it out word for word. Potential customers will see your banner ad on over 80% of the internet, making it look like you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, on advertising. So what this is saying is that, once again, all of the media that you're running elsewhere will be made to work a whole lot harder with follow-up messaging with remarketing, because you're constantly speaking to relevant audiences based on how they've interacted with your brand. And you won't be constantly speaking to audiences that are not relevant to you. That's key. They are extremely relevant to you. They are your low-hanging fruit. And you'll be creating a perception across them that you're really investing hard in marketing your brand. So the next point that I wanted to talk about with regard to why Google is flexible bidding options. So it's possible to buy remarketing on CPM or CPC deal terms at a number of other providers throughout Southeast Asia. Where Google differs is the auction pricing model. So CPM or CPC is very, very different when it's written in at a fixed cost. So to give you an example, at the start of a campaign you might get, say, a $1 CPC for remarketing. And then your entire campaign will run at $1. It will never change. The reality of the situation, though, is that those clicks or those impressions are being won at very, very different prices across the life of the campaign. But because it's a fixed price model, the advertiser doesn't get to take advantage of those fluctuations in cost. And they're often to a lower end, not a higher end. An auction-priced system or an auction-priced program means that you only pay 1 cent more than the market demands. So if you could drive the same click that you're paying $1 elsewhere for 30 cents, you only pay 31 cents. If you drive it at 60 cents, you pay 61. It is a true auction based on market competitiveness, not based on what we decide at Google or what some other publisher decides is the right price. It's a market-based pricing model. The second thing that I want to talk about with bidding options is conversion optimizer. So our conversion optimizer technology allows you to actually optimize all of your remarketing activity towards your end conversion as well. So if you think about what that means, you're using two pieces of information from your website to really make sure that you're targeting in a very niche way and make sure that you're leveraging every single dollar that you're spending in the most effective manner. So moving on, targeting combinations are really one of the most, unique selling points to Google. Because if you look at all of the targeting options that Google have within their portfolio, you're looking at placement targeting, topic targeting, contextual targeting, interest category marketing, or behavioral targeting. All of these targeting tools are available for you to actually layer over the top of all of your remarketing data. So if you think about what that means, it means that you can take all of your information, you can then leverage all of Google's information or Google's data, you can layer them over the top of each other, and as a result, you can be very, very niche in the way that you target. You can start to create a situation whereby you are speaking to a very, very specific audience, the audience that you want, at exactly the moment you want to speak to them, with exactly the right message. And we'll talk about messaging in 1 second when we talk about the creative tools that Google have available. But if you look at the quote on that slide, transparency, relevant reach, and last but not least, the granular targeting possibilities enable us to achieve continuous profitable growth. So granular targeting possibilities mean that advertisers can now reach audiences in a much more specific manner. There's no spray and pray whatsoever. So as I said, I just want to quickly talk about creative options available at Google, and specifically I want to talk about Display Ad Builder. Now, Display Ad Builder, as the slide reads, allows you to create simple text ads, image ads, and also rich media ads for free. Now, if you think about what this means, it means that you can actually customize your creative quickly and easily at a much more efficient price point, which will allow you, and this ties back into what I was just saying before about the right user, it will allow you to reach the right user at the right time with exactly the right message. So it allows you to closely tailor your messaging and to do it in a very time-efficient and cost-efficient manner. Now, finally, I just wanted to talk about customization of audiences, because this will really feed into the back end of the webinar when we start to look at sample executions and that sort of thing. So Google's interface actually allows you to create custom audiences using any combination of the remarketing lists that sit within AdWords. The ability to do this in a very, very time-efficient, flexible, and simple manner is second to none. And so what this allows you to do is start to look at all the different objectives you want to achieve, figure out exactly how your audience behavior aligns with these objectives, and then actually create the remarketing lists or the remarketing goals in a really, really easy, simple fashion. So if we're just going to quickly summarize or sum up the why Google points, first of all, there's reach. Google reaches the majority of the online space, which means we can then reach the majority of your relevant users. Secondly, Google has superior bidding options in that we allow CPM, CPC, and CPA optimization. But the CPM and CPC, they're billed or booked around an auction-based pricing model. Thirdly, there's targeting options that are second to none in market, whether it be behavioral or audience-based targeting or contextual targeting. They're second to none, and we can actually lift those targeting parameters and layer them over the top of your information to create very, very custom segments. The fourth point is creative ease. We can actually allow you to tailor creative in a very, very customized way so that you can then reach users that are relevant to you when you want to reach them with the right message. And finally, the customization of audiences is extremely simple within the AdWords interface. So that moves me on to sample executions. And I wanted to revisit now the new marketing funnel that we talked about and really sort of tie this back into the front end of the webinar. So if you look at the brand preference piece within the traditional marketing funnel, and in this instance we're looking at the blue piece as being the traditional marketing funnel, really the most common execution that we see within this traditional marketing phase of brand preference is the abandoner execution. So reaching users who have reached your site but haven't yet completed that desired action. And we talked about that a fair bit at the start of the webinar. Now, the recommendation here is to remarket to these users who have shown that interest, remarket to these users that we would consider your low-hanging fruit with a really strong promotional offer, really, incentivized campaign. And time sensitivity is always something that will increase conversion rate by creating that urgency within the customer. So what I wanted to do is just provide a really, really basic example of an abandoner execution. But then not only that, just sort of, cover off a couple of reasons why someone might just actually shut their browser and abandon the process. So if you're looking at this example here, this is signing up for Gmail. Now, as you can see where the highlight runs, and I'm not sure if that animation has come up for the audience, but if it has, it highlights step 1, step 2, step 3. This is a 3-step process. And if you think back to our very basic example at the start of the webinar, it's very, very similar. Now, in this instance, I'm signing up for an email account, and there might be a number of reasons as to why I don't actually want to plug in my details on the first slide. Now, as this animation reads, it says I'm not sure I want to sign up. That raises a couple of questions. Why don't I want to sign up? Is it because I'm worried about privacy? Is it because that I'm worried about, the cost outlay that I might have to make? In this instance, that's obviously not the case because it's an email account. It's more about the whole privacy issue potentially. Secondly, moving along the funnel, I've already plugged in my details, and it might come down to, look, I haven't actually got time to finish this conversion process, so I have to actually close my browser. So here I'm just showing a couple of examples as to what can happen throughout a standard conversion funnel. These things do happen. As I said before, 97% of people would come onto your site and then don't actually convert on the first visit. So these are the things that can, really dictate why they're not converting. The idea, though, or the principle, is always the same. What we need to do is ensure that regardless of why a user closed their browser, we keep speaking to them and keep remarketing to them in order to get them to the back end of the funnel to a point where they've actually converted and they've signed up, and in this case, for an email account. So moving on, we're just going to have a look at what we were terming the new marketing funnel before, and that's the post-purchase phase. So things like brand loyalty and brand advocacy. So first of all, I want to look at the whole cross-sell execution. So cross-selling to existing customers. So if a user or a customer has actually gone on and purchased something on your site, we can obviously track that conversion. And then once they've fallen into that conversion labeled cookie list, we can then start speaking to them based on, what might be the next best offer. So in this example, a user or a customer has come on to a site and bought a camera. So the next best offer, as the advertiser decides, is to actually market them with a photo print ad. But this could be applicable to a range of different products or a range of different industries. If you think about credit cards again, if somebody signs up for a credit card, then, it might be worthwhile marketing them with a personal loan creative. Or it might be worth, marketing to them with home loan creative based on the fact that they've shown brand affinity. They've shown comfort in your brand. So why not speak to them with a message about, a more lucrative product? And the last piece is to promote customer loyalty and retention. And this really feeds into the brand advocacy objective that we talked about before. So keep your website visitors coming back and remind them why they love you. Because if they remember why they love you, they will generally share with others why they love you. And as I said, that really feeds tightly into the brand advocacy objective that we talked about before. So our recommendation here is to remarket to customers who have already purchased, with customized creative once again, with discount off next purchase or join rewards program type marketing. Now these are just some very top line examples. You can go as deep as you want with this sort of thing. And Google and your customer relationship teams will be there to obviously help, help you with building out these different programs and these different marketing objectives. These are just some very, very top line examples, as I said. So what I want to do to now finish the webinar is actually just move on to a quick case study from China. And what this case study does is lines up performance media activity versus remarketing activity and shows how effective it can be from an online conversion perspective. So in this instance, the business model, as it reads, it was the biggest 3C online retailer of B2C market in China. It is one of the most popular and powerful e-business websites in China's e-business field. The advertiser goal was obviously geared around driving online conversions, so direct response or DR goals, focused on a really, really efficient CPA. So the goal, as I said, was increased purchase volume at a reasonable CPA. Now the thing to point out here that it wasn't just about making it cheaper, it was about increasing overall volume. So that's really, really important when you're thinking about remarketing. It's not just about pushing down your price, it's about incremental uplifts. Because if you think about the 97% of people that are falling off your site first time, a lot of them will never remember to come back. If you're remarketing to them, a higher percentage of those users will keep coming back to your site. And a higher percentage of those users will then end up converting. So as I said, it's not just about cost efficiency, it's also about incremental uplift. Now in this instance, if you look at the conversion rate from search to Google Display Network to remarketing, it's a 14.7% conversion rate. So that's 3x on search and about 100x on Google Display Network that's not remarketing. Now that's not to say that search and Google Display Network don't play an extremely important part in the overall process. Google Display Network could be driving a lot of first-time traffic in this instance. And first-time traffic is extremely important because remarketing obviously doesn't work without first-time traffic. But the key message here is that from a conversion rate perspective, or I guess the message that the conversion rate is telling us, is that this remarketing execution is really talking to the low-hanging fruit and converting people in a really, really effective way. The next thing to consider is that the remarketing CPA was 1/13 of Google Display Network and 1/4 of search. So just purely from a cost efficiency perspective, remarketing proved to be extremely effective. But then the final point that I want to make before we sum up what we've covered today is that the conversion volume, overall campaign conversion volume, increased by 57% as well. So that really ties back to what I was saying in the last slide, that it's not about just cost efficiency. It's also about incremental uplift in overall campaign volume by way of talking to users that would never have come back if you didn't have remarketing in place, by users that have interacted with your brand on a one-time basis and not a 2, 3, 4, or hundreds of times basis. And that really brings me to the end of the webinar. I just want to sum up what we've covered today. First of all, we've covered why use remarketing. Now, remarketing is a tool that allows you to reach users when they're not searching and when they're interacting with a range of other content. And it allows you a platform whereby you can then make all of your other media work harder. It allows you to drive repeat traffic and allows you to close the cycle. And it also allows you to take the conversation further beyond the traditional marketing funnel and start talking to users to really encourage brand advocacy and continued loyalty with your brand or your product. The second thing that we talked about was why Google. There's obviously reach, there's bidding options, the extent of the targeting options that we have at our fingertips the creative ease with which you can create messaging to align with your target audiences, and the way that you can customize your audiences really sets Google apart. And with that, I'm just going to open up the webinar for questions. I know that we finished around 20 minutes early, and the reason was so that we could take as many questions as possible. There hasn't been any questions that have popped up in front of me throughout the webinar. So if you do have a question, please feel free to pop it through, and everybody else more than welcome to stay on the line while we wait for these questions to pop through. Okay, I have just been told that multiple questions have come through, and I'm just getting access to them now, everybody. If you could just please wait a second. Okay. So the first question that I've got here is, does it call for more spends over and above the AdWords bidding? And that's come from Sanjib. So the answer to that is no. All remarketing is another line of targeting that you will set up within your AdWords account, and you will just bid on a CPC or a CPM basis as you would for any other targeting type that you would have live. So it would be exactly the same as setting up a contextual targeting campaign or a placement targeting campaign or a topic targeting campaign. The difference is that you would actually just use an audience list or a remarketing list as your targeting parameter and then apply bids accordingly. Now, there may be a situation where you have to pay slightly more or you might have to bid slightly more because the amount of users or the volume potential is quite finite, in that you're only speaking to a very small amount of people compared to who you'd be speaking to, say, with an interest category execution or targeting type. So you need to make sure that you bid quite high to ensure that you win every single relevant impression. But in saying that, the uplifts in costs are not that high, as you could see from the case study that we showed you, and those results are fairly indicative. So the second question that we've got is, how to get ahead of competitors in Google retargeting. Hang on, I'm just going to open this up and see if that... So I guess the answer to how to get ahead in retargeting is to ensure, first of all, that you have a very, very robust targeting matrix, or beg your pardon, tag matrix in place. So tag up your client's site or tag up your site in a really, really accurate fashion from ball one, because the worst thing that you can be doing is sort of chasing your tail a little bit and refinding, tags that have been put in the wrong place. And that really ties back into campaign performance, in that if you are targeting to remarketing lists that are incorrect, then your results will obviously suffer. And this happens more than you would ever believe, and that's why it sounds very, very simple. It's actually a common problem, in that there are things missed at the tag implementation stage. Once the tags are implemented, a lot of the things are really up to you as to how you actually leverage all of those audience segments. But if the tags aren't in place properly, then you're really behind the game. Okay. Okay, so I've got a question from Naveen. Audiences are somewhat paranoid in recent times and take lengths to delete and remove cookies on a weekly or daily basis. Would this mean that we would not be able to target consumers who have erased their cookies but are in our lists? So the answer, Naveen, is 100% you would not be able to target these users. You would not be able to target them with remarketing. You would not be able to target them with any behavioral targeting whatsoever, because once they've deleted their cookies, then they are deleted out of our lists. So I guess to acknowledge your question, this is an issue, but to be quite honest, it's probably not as big an issue as you may be thinking, in that, and I wouldn't want to put a percentage around it, but it would be a sub 10%, from what I understand, of users that actually delete cookies actively. So I have another question from Bonch. Can a remarketing campaign stand on its own without other paid advertisements? The answer to that is, of course, it absolutely can. You can easily just tag up your website and rely completely on organic traffic. I guess the thing to remember, though, is that you can only remarket to as many people as make it through to your website. So the whole idea is that you have, or try to have, an even media mix or an even media plan, whereby you have, multiple different areas of the conversion funnel or the marketing funnel covered, from a first-time traffic perspective through to a repeat traffic objective. So yes, the answer is yes, 100%, but you'll probably be speaking to a smaller audience unless you are a heavily trafficked organic site. I have a question from Sanjib. Will it be possible for the Google team to share a case study on an education training organization in India and abroad? The answer to that, Sanjib, is that I will get you in contact with the relevant people in India, and I'm sure that there'll be something they can provide to you. But I'll take that down as a follow-up. So I have a question here from Preeti. I beg your pardon if my pronunciations of your names here are incorrect. How long a campaign needs to collect cookies? So the question is, how long do you need to have tags down on the site in order to collect the relevant amount of cookies? The answer to that is that you can collect cookies after day one, but you'll obviously be delivering very, very small volumes after one day because only so many people come across your site in one day. Ideally, we work to about a 30-day window. So you can start from day one and things will slowly ramp up. Day by day, things will get, I guess, higher in volume. And then after a month, you will reach, what we would consider a capacity, in that if we applied a 30-day window, then the users who who visited your site on day one will actually drop out. And then the users who came in on day 31 will come in. So it's a rolling cookie pool. So it will just stay live, will only stay live to users who have visited the site within the last 30 days. So to answer your question, it doesn't matter. It can be 1, 2, or 3 days, but that's really going to be low volumes. And then 30 days is a general cookie window that we would work towards. You can obviously dictate that, though. You could have a 7-day cookie window if you wanted. So I have a question here from Inderjeet. How well does remarketing work for lead-based accounts? The answer is that remarketing, was born out of the success of remarketing was born out of working so strongly for lead-based accounts. Anything direct response, which I'm interpreting as what you mean by lead-based accounts, anything direct response almost needs to have a remarketing line on it. And in fact, in many mature markets, that certainly is the case. In Australia, in America, in England, or the UK, generally a lot of the DR campaigns will have a very, very focused and very, very robust remarketing strategy purely because it does work so well for lead-based activity. Okay, I have a couple of questions from Deepak. How does Google segment various audiences? What kind of tagging is needed if we wish to place tags in our client website? Okay, so all you need to do, and you can do this in a self-service way, or you can lean on your client relationship manager. But what you need to do is create an AdWords tag within your AdWords CID or your AdWords account. You need to then take that remarketing code, you need to lift it, and you need to place it within your website. And then once you have that, that will just start to create a list for you within your AdWords CID. So then you can then start to mix and match your different lists. So you might have a landing page list, you might have a product page list, as I said before, and a confirmed user list. And then you can start to remarket to different users based on what those lists are telling you. So an example could be, I want to reach my landing page list, but I don't want to reach the users who actually went on and converted because they're not relevant to me anymore. But I guess to go back to your original question, and that really talks to how does Google segment various audiences. It's really up to you. You're the one who segments the audiences. We just allow you a data warehouse whereby you can store your various remarketing lists. And to go back to your tagging question, it really is something that you need to create either yourself or with the help of the Google team that you work with within your AdWords CID. And then if you're an agency, you need to get your client to implement them on their site. If you're a direct client, you can just implement it, obviously, yourself. There are a number of different instructional tools that you can have a look at online as well, which I might just send to you separately, Deepak. And the second question is, could you share a few automobile-related case studies? Once again, that's the follow-up, so I'll make sure to come back to you, Deepak. So I have a question from Arsan, who asks that 97% of visitors do not complete the conversion cycle on the first visit. What percentage comes back on their own without advertising to complete the cycle? Arsan, that is an extremely good question, and I don't have the answer off my head right now. It will differ based on market, so it will differ based on whether we're talking about Australia or we're talking about Southeast Asia and that sort of thing. 97% is an average global number. But yes, as I said, it will differ based on market. It will also differ based on advertiser. But it's a good question, and I'll make sure to follow up on it with you. So I have a question from John from the Philippines. So remarketing only works for clients with websites? The answer is yes. Without a website, we can't track anybody, and so we can't speak to them, based on how they're interacting with your brand. The next question is there a remarketing cap concept? I'm sorry, John, I'm not 100% sure what that means. And if you'd like to maybe provide a little bit more information around that question, I can come back to you. Oh, hang on. Defined as putting a limit on how many times you can remarket versus level. Oh, I see what you're saying. So I think the question you're asking, John, is can you cap the amount of times you you speak to a user or how many times you show them an ad? And the answer is 100% yes. All of these tools are available to you, once again, within the AdWords interface. What you're talking about is a thing called frequency capping. So you can actually cap the frequency of ads that you show a user over any given period of time. So it could be, I only want to show a user 5 ads a day, or I only want to show a user 15 ads in a month. The recommendation that we have is not to set frequency capping. And the reason for that is that the user's shown interest. They're generally very, very close to purchasing, and they'll probably want to hear your advertising message. And me personally have seen many, many campaigns where the frequency has been, very, very high, and the results have been very, very strong. So, recommendation, as I said, is not to place a cap, but if you do want a cap, it is 100% available to you. So I'm just having some trouble finding these questions. If you just bear with me. Okay, so the question that I have now is from Sharmina. Hello, Ben. Since the remarketing option is to input list of visitors' cookies, does this mean we have to manually update the list? Apologies if we missed some details. So the answer, Sharmina, is you absolutely do not have to update anything. Once the tag is in place, then cookies will simply populate in line with how you've set that up within the AdWords interface. So if you have set that tag up to relate to a landing page, then every single time that tag fires, based on the fact that a user has gone to that page, that cookie will just then populate in the list that you've set up. And that will just be a rolling list, as I said before. I said in earlier questioning, we'll keep updating over time. I hope that answered your question. Okay, so we have a question from Naveen again. Looking at under 10% cookie dropout rate, is there an industry understanding on how long you should hold onto your remarketing list versus the remarketing data collection of 540 days? So Naveen, I think I answered this before inadvertently. The answer is I would generally work to a 30-day window. In saying that, sometimes a lot longer period can be relevant. So in an instance where you're looking at potentially talking to a user who's signed up for a year-long contract, you might want to keep your cookies for 365 days, and then 1 month before their contract is to come up for renewal, you could then start speaking to them with a renewal offer. So that could be one example of when you would actually keep a longer cookie window, and that is why we have such long options available for you. But if you're looking at just a standard direct response campaign or a cross-sell campaign, then 30 to 60 days is probably where you want to be. Sharmina has sent through a question, can we get a copy of the slides presented? Yes, you can. These will be sent out post-webinar. John, I've just seen your question with regard to whether I can come back to you. I certainly can, and I will after the webinar with information on frequency capping. So I have a question from Aditya. How does custom combination work? Example, my combination is people who have visited a specific product page and people who have made a purchase from the website. So in this instance, you would actually target a remarketing list that relates to the product that you're talking about. And then you would actually just say, and have visited the confirmation page or the purchase page as well. So there's two ways you can do it. You can do remarketing lists where you'd be has visited the product page or the confirmation or purchase page, and in that instance, they could have been to one or the other, and you can remarket to them. In the instance that you're talking about, I believe, is that you're saying you want them to have been to both, and if they haven't been to both, then you won't talk to them. So it's just creating two different remarketing lists and then combining the two as a qualifier. So they have to have been to both in order for them to receive the ad that you're after, or sorry, the ad that you want to serve them. Now, guys, I think we've got about 1 minute to go, so I'll try and get through one more question. And I've got a question from Melrose Co. When you embed cookies, you only identify the IP address or the machine, but you don't identify the particular user, especially during a campaign. How do you ensure that you will be targeting the same users, for example, when there are multiple different machines? That's a really, really good question, and you're exactly right in that we don't actually capture anything beyond the IP address. So no PII data, so no personally identifiable information. So I guess from a privacy perspective, that's a good thing. And it's actually against the law for us to capture that data. We wouldn't do it anyway. But then that does lead to the problem that you're talking about, which is how do we know exactly who we're speaking to when it comes to their name, their age, exactly who they are, depending on whether they're on their mobile phone or whether they're on their home PC. Or, if they're on their home PC, they might have their mum, their dad and their uncle using the same computer. That is a problem. That is something that can't necessarily be got around because it is only IP targeting. But I guess really the offset to that is that remarketing allows you to target in a far more targeted way than any other media. And while it's not 100% accurate to name or email address or something like that, it is extremely targeted regardless of the crossover. Thanks for your question. That was a really good question. And I hope I answered it for you. So I think I'm getting a wind up now, guys. Thank you all very much for your time. I know that I haven't got through all of the questions. There was quite an inundation of questions. In fact, there was over 45 questions. So I apologize if I didn't get to your question. I will do my best to come back to you in the next day or so with answers. And then obviously there's some direct follow-ups that I've talked about, which I'll come back and talk to you guys directly about. But once again, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And if there's anything else that you need help with, don't hesitate to get in contact with your relevant Google relationship manager. Thanks, guys.